Disclaimer: this video is for education and commentary only and is not medical or legal advice. Watching this content does not create a physician-patient or attorney-client relationship. When I discuss lawsuits or court decisions, I'm relying on publicly available records and I will distinguish allegations from findings. My analysis reflects my opinions about risk, systems, and documentation, not personal judgments about any individual. To protect privacy, I may omit or change identifying details where appropriate. If you need medical or legal advice for your situation, consult a qualified professional. If this is a medical emergency, call 911 or your local emergency number. A young boy in New York dies from septic shock after visiting an emergency room for what was thought to be a routine sports injury. An elderly patient in Alabama has an MRSA culture finalized after discharge, and that result becomes the center of a high-stakes malpractice case. One case leads to sweeping regulatory reform. The other ends with a dramatic appellate twist. A $3.2 million verdict becomes $100,000. Different states, different timelines, different legal endings, but the same hidden danger. Results that are generated, but not reliably converted into action. Both cases illustrate a common problem. An order is placed, but the results never reliably reach the right person for action. For physicians, this is one integrated workflow story. Who owns the result when it posts? Who confirms receipt? Who informs the patient or family? Who documents what was done and why? If those questions are fuzzy, outcomes worsen quickly, and legal exposure rises just as fast. The first case has become symbolic for a reason. In late March 2012, the patient presented to the emergency room after what seemed like a minor event. Over the next few days, his condition worsened, and he unfortunately died of septic shock. The discussion that followed centered on warning signs, communication reliability, and whether escalation happened when it should have. For clinicians, the most sobering part is how familiar the pattern feels. Data appears, it signals urgency, but the system does not reliably convert that information into action. Was this pediatric case a one-off, a sign of systemic failure, or a rare life-threatening illness that presented atypically? In rapidly evolving sepsis, no single alert saves a life on its own. An alert has to trigger recognition, then escalation, then treatment, then reassessment, with each link documented and owned. If any link is weak, especially around communication, time slips away. And in sepsis, time is physiology. This case settled confidentially, so it did not produce a widely cited appellate merits opinion. But the policy impact was enormous. The public and professional response was not move on, it was fix the system. And that fix changed how New York hospitals were expected to screen, escalate, and report sepsis care. New York's response is often called Rory's Regulations, codified under 10 NYCRR 405.2 and 405.4. At a practical level, these rules pushed hospitals toward explicit protocolized sepsis pathways with training and reporting expectations. That shift matters in court because codified process expectations are easier to test against records. In plain terms, once workflow expectations are formalized, it becomes harder to defend vague execution. Now we transition to SEP 1. Whether you love it, hate it, or live in uneasy truce with it, SEP 1 changed the national conversation. It moved sepsis workflow from best practice discussion toward measurable, time-stamped process accountability. And once care becomes measurable, it also becomes more litigable. This should not go unnoticed by clinicians. SEP 1 asked for time-sensitive sepsis actions in sequence: lactate measurement, cultures before antibiotics, broad-spectrum antimicrobial treatment, fluids and hemodynamic support when indicated, plus reassessment steps. On paper, this sounds straightforward. In real life, it plays out in noisy EDs, uncertain diagnoses, staffing limits, and evolving physiology. That gap between paper and reality is exactly where documentation quality becomes decisive. One of the most important lessons for physicians is that time zero is not just a compliance concept. It is often a legal anchor. Plaintiffs and defense experts may debate when sepsis was recognizable. Courts and juries then look at documentation to reconstruct that timeline. Order time is not administration time. Result time is not acknowledgement time. If the chart is vague, your clinical reasoning can disappear in hindsight. Every experienced clinician knows rigid protocol adherence is not always the safest bedside move, but undocumented deviation is dangerous in litigation. If you deviate, chart the element, the reason, what you did instead, and how the patient responded. This is not defensive charting theater. It is accurate storytelling of clinical judgment under pressure. As clinicians, we should strive to do this on every patient chart. There are credible controversies around SEP1, overtreatment concerns, all or nothing scoring issues, and ongoing debate about outcomes in different subgroups. Those debates are real and important, but legal review often asks a narrower question. What did this team do? When did they do it? And what does the chart show? You can disagree with policy design and still need impeccable timeline documentation. Now to our next case. This case shifts from pediatric sepsis in New York to a similar issue in a post-discharge abnormal result communication in Alabama. The patient entered the emergency room in early September 2005. A throat culture finalized after discharge from the emergency room showed MRSA. What happened next, who was informed, when, and with what consequence became the central fight. The timeline is what gives Davis its force. After initial care and discharge, the result entered the medical record. 2 months passed. Then the patient deteriorated and returned critically ill in November. She died on November 8, 2005. In cases like this, the legal battle is not just about what the lab found. It is about whether the information reached the people who could still alter the trajectory. At trial, plaintiff experts argued that failure to report the MRSA result breached the standard of care and contributed to death. Defense experts challenged that causal link and offered alternate explanations, such as MRSA in a throat culture could suggest colonization rather than an active infection requiring intervention. The jury sided with the estate and returned a $3.2 million verdict. For clinicians, this is a reminder that causation arguments are often the hinge of the case, and juries may find one narrative more coherent than another. In later episodes, we will dig more into this narrative issue. Then the legal architecture took over. In final appellate posture, sovereign immunity arguments were rejected, but statutory cap analysis under Alabama law reduced recovery to $100,000. This is one of the hardest legal truths for physicians to absorb. Trial liability findings and final financial outcomes can diverge dramatically. A family can win the case and still receive a fraction of the jury award.
Another issue in this case involves the patient's follow-up. The patient was instructed to follow up with her primary care physician after discharge from the emergency room, and she did just a few days later. It is alleged that this visit was an opportunity for a physician to identify the abnormal result and intervene. But according to the plaintiff's counsel, that did not happen, and the physician was named in the malpractice lawsuit. I can imagine this situation confronting any of us in family medicine or internal medicine, or, as we will see in future episodes, physicians in virtually any specialty. Should this physician have noticed this abnormal result and intervened? We can unpack that in another episode, and I can also share my views in the comments or as a follow-up video. In the end, the primary care physician filed a motion for summary judgment, and it was granted, effectively removing the physician from the case. It should be a reminder to all of us what can be lurking in the chart when a patient presents for follow-up after another provider's visit, a hospitalization, an urgent care encounter, or an emergency room discharge. In a rapidly evolving and complex medical system, how do we ensure that important information is communicated and summarized so it does not get lost only to reappear when catastrophe strikes. We will continue to explore this in this series. Now, back to the story.
These two patients are different in age, geography, disease context, and legal posture, but they share a core vulnerability: result follow-up reliability. Not just whether the test existed, but whether the system forced closure. Did the right clinician receive it? Did someone document acknowledgement? Was the patient informed? Was there a concrete action plan? These are process questions, but they decide both safety and legal trajectories. In real hospitals, failures are rarely dramatic at the moment they happen. They look ordinary. A result post during shift change. Weekend staffing assumes weekday callback behavior. A pending test is mentioned, but no owner is named. A message is sent, but no acknowledgement is logged. A policy exists, but no one audits adherence under load. Most organizations already have written rules. Risk lives in whether those rules hold at 2 a.m. on Sunday during volume spikes.
If you want one practical takeaway, make sure every test you order has a reason, and make sure that reason is visible in the record. Document the result when it returns. If it is still pending when you discharge the patient or hand the patient off to another provider, create an explicit handoff that the result is pending. Name an owner for follow-up, who will review it, who will contact the patient, and what action they will take if it is abnormal. Make sure the patient or family knows what is still pending at discharge and understands why close follow-up matters as a safety net. This can happen to any of us. It does not matter how smart, compassionate, or careful you are. I hope these two cases illustrate a pervasive risk we continue to face as clinicians. This is one of those issues that will persist as medicine becomes more complex and care becomes more fragmented.
The central lesson from this discussion is straightforward. A result in the chart is not the endpoint of care. The endpoint is acknowledged action, communicated clearly, documented precisely, and followed through. That is better medicine. It is also better legal protection. One misconception physicians have is that litigation mainly tests clinical brilliance. In reality, litigation often tests narrative coherence. A jury does not experience your shift in real time. A jury experiences your care through records, testimony, and reconstructed timelines built months or years later. They see sequence, not stress. They see timestamps, not interruptions. They see what is charted, not what you intended. That is why follow-up communication cases are so dangerous. They are simple to explain visually. Result posted, no documented acknowledgement, no clear call to patient, no provable action before decline. If defense wants to counter that narrative, it needs a stronger one grounded in precise chronology and visible decision-making. When charts are sparse, generic, or delayed, that stronger narrative becomes harder to build. This is not a criticism of clinicians. It is a structural reality of how courts consume medical events.
This one is important to remember. Results can pile up in your inbox as a busy workday turns into a week, and it can be tempting to sign off on everything quickly. Resist that impulse. Once you acknowledge a result, you may be viewed as owning it. In the unlikely event of a bad outcome, you may have unknowingly pulled yourself into litigation. Also remember, results are not always routed to the correct provider. In some systems, routing can be arbitrary. Regardless, review what lands in your queue. Forward results to the correct clinician or service, or route them back to the sender with a clear note.
We also need to normalize this principle. Communication is treatment, not in a symbolic sense, in a physiological sense. When a critical or potentially significant abnormal result is communicated quickly, evaluation and intervention can accelerate. When communication is delayed or absent, disease progression gets more runway. In sepsis and serious infection, that runway can be catastrophic. Families experience these moments in concrete terms. Did someone call us? Did we understand urgency? Were return precautions clear? Did anyone tell us what to watch for tonight? Those are not legal afterthoughts. They are clinical events that either reduce risk or increase it. Strong teams treat patient notification as part of the care plan, not administrative closure. Preventing silent result failures requires culture, not just software. Culture means teams can surface near misses without fear, discuss weak links openly, and redesign workflows before harm occurs. Culture means leaders ask process questions after adverse events, not just individual blame questions. Culture means residents and new attendings are trained to think about result ownership at the moment of ordering, not after discharge. Culture means quality dashboards include unresolved critical result metrics in the same conversation as readmissions and mortality. Most importantly, culture means people believe that speaking up about communication gaps is a professional duty, not a career risk. If you step back, this entire episode can be reduced to one operational command: close the loop. Our first case shows the consequences when recognition and communication pathways fail under pressure. SEP1 emerged from this broader era of accountability and pushes modern systems toward measurable timelines, exposing documentation gaps while aiming to improve safety. The second case illustrates the same vulnerability in a different context: an abnormal lab result that is generated but not reliably communicated. Together, these cases also show a path forward: assign owners, escalate reliably, document clearly, communicate directly, audit relentlessly. In a complex healthcare system, perfection is unrealistic. Preventable silence is not. One practical issue that deserves more attention is training transition. Residents and new attendings are taught disease frameworks extensively, but many receive limited formal training in result closure operations under real workload conditions. They are expected to understand handoff logic, inbox triage hierarchy, legal implications of pending studies at discharge, and escalation mechanics that vary by institution and by shift. That expectation gap is risky. Institutions can reduce it by adding explicit abnormal result simulation to orientation. Who owns what? How long before escalation? Where to document closure? And when to directly contact the patient versus route through care coordination. If we train ACLS as a standard language for emergencies, we should train closed-loop result communication as a standard language for preventable deterioration. Make this a team discipline, not a physician burden alone. Nursing workflows, lab processes, care coordination, pharmacy timing, and IT routing all influence whether the right message reaches the right person at the right time. The strongest systems are interdisciplinary by design and measurable by output. Decide today what your service will own by next month: fewer unresolved criticals, faster acknowledgement intervals, or complete callback documentation for pending high-risk studies. Pick one, measure it, and improve it visibly. Over time, that is how culture changes from reactive to reliable. This content is educational, not medical or legal advice, and it does not create a professional relationship. Sources are listed when available. For personal guidance, consult your own clinician or attorney. This is the Charted Defense, where medicine and law intersect. This is my first venture into content creation. I have been in practice as a physician for 15 years, and I am currently applying to law school. As this series evolves, I'll share a malpractice lawsuit that happened early in my career, how it affected me, and what I learned from it. There are many videos yet to come. Next episode, we expand to national case patterns and system-level fixes when results fall through the cracks, and we will talk more about how to protect ourselves so we can protect our patients. Thanks for joining me. Subscribe and share this with your team.